What happens when the most dangerous gang leader in the Western Hemisphere believes he is completely beyond reach, hiding deep inside a jungle where no army, no police force, and no government can touch him? On June 12, 2026, a single explosion in the Venezuelan jungle answered that question permanently, and the United States military released the strike footage for the entire world to witness. If this kind of in-depth breakdown gives you the full picture that mainstream news consistently leaves out, do me a favor right now. Hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to understand what just happened. Trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next in this story. To understand why the American military launched a precision strike inside another country's sovereign territory, you first need to understand the man they were hunting and the empire he built from behind bars. His name was Hector Guerrero Flores. Intelligence agencies called him Nino Guerrero, but across 14 nations, his victims knew him by a far darker reputation. He was the founder and supreme commander of Tren de Aragua, one of the most violent, most far-reaching criminal organizations the modern world has ever seen. A lot of people hear the name Tren de Aragua and picture a street gang, maybe a few hundred guys with tattoos running a rough neighborhood somewhere. That image could not be more dangerously wrong. Tren de Aragua had over 7,000 documented members operating across 14 countries on 4 continents. Their business was not just narcotics. It was human suffering manufactured on an industrial scale, drug trafficking, human trafficking, forced prostitution of women and girls, some as young as 12 years old, murder for hire, extortion of entire communities, kidnapping for ransom. They ran every one of those operations, and they ran them with the discipline, the hierarchy, and the financial sophistication of a multinational corporation. This was not random, chaotic street violence. This was organized, managed, calculated. They maintained supply chains, distribution networks, and financial systems engineered to move and launder hundreds of millions of dollars across international borders without detection. And the single architect managing all of it, first from a prison cell, then from a jungle compound, was Nino Guerrero. The victims of this empire have names: Jocelyn Nungare, 12 years old, Laken Riley, 22, and hundreds more whose names never appeared in any headline because no one issued a press release when they disappeared. These were not abstract statistics on a government report. They were daughters. They were sisters. They were human beings whose only mistake was being in the wrong place when Tren de Aragua decided they were profitable. Every single one of those shattered lives traces directly back to the network this man designed and controlled. Let me tell you where this empire was born. A place called Tocorón Prison in Aragua State, Venezuela. Tocorón was supposed to be a government-run correctional facility, a place where convicted criminals served their sentences under the authority of the state. In reality, it became Nino Guerrero's personal kingdom. Inside its walls, he constructed a swimming pool. He built restaurants, a nightclub. He even maintained a private zoo. The prison guards were technically employed by the Venezuelan government. They drew government paychecks, but they answered to Guerrero. He paid better. He was far more dangerous than any bureaucrat in Caracas, and the government of Nicolás Maduro either could not or simply would not intervene. In October 2023, Venezuelan authorities finally decided to retake Tocorón by military force. They sent in soldiers, breached the walls. They found the luxury compound exactly as described: the pool, the nightclub, the zoo. But they did not find the man. Guerrero had already vanished into thin air. He had slipped deep into the jungle interior of Bolívar State, one of the most remote and physically inaccessible regions in all of South America. Dense, suffocating jungle canopy stretching for hundreds of miles, almost no roads, virtually no modern infrastructure. And from that jungle, surrounded by armed loyalists who would die before revealing his location, he kept running his entire criminal empire as if absolutely nothing had changed. So here is the problem that landed on the desk of the United States Southern Command, known as Southcom. How do you locate one man in a jungle the size of a small European country? A man with no permanent address. A man who relocates constantly. A man protected by soldiers willing to take a bullet rather than talk. And how do you eliminate him when there are no American military bases within 1,000 miles of where he is hiding? Consider how different this was from previous high-value target operations. When the United States tracked Osama bin Laden, it took years of intelligence work. But they ultimately had a fixed compound in a country where extensive military relationships already existed. When American forces targeted ISIS leaders in Syria, they had forward operating bases and coalition air superiority across the theater. Venezuela offered none of those advantages. No bases, no friendly airspace agreements, no ground forces already positioned in the region. Southcom had to architect the entire operational framework from nothing. This is where the story stops being a crime narrative and transforms into a military operation unlike anything most people have ever heard described in detail. You cannot fly American fighter jets over Venezuelan airspace for days without triggering a massive diplomatic incident. A federal arrest warrant signed in Washington carries absolutely zero weight in the middle of a South American jungle. A conventional operation, helicopters, ground teams, extraction plans, would demand basing agreements, logistical infrastructure, and diplomatic permissions that simply did not exist. The traditional playbook was discarded from the very first planning session. What Southcom constructed instead was something far more sophisticated and far more lethal. A layered surveillance and strike architecture designed to neutralize every one of those obstacles simultaneously. The first layer was persistent wide-area surveillance. The platform almost certainly deployed was an RQ-4 Global Hawk or an MQ-4C Triton, unmanned aircraft that operate at 50,000 feet or higher. At that altitude, Venezuelan air defense systems cannot detect them. They produce zero acoustic signature audible from the ground, and they carry synthetic aperture radar, a technology capable of mapping structures, tracking vehicle movements, and recording patterns of human activity across hundreds of square kilometers at the same time. This was not about monitoring a single building. This was about surveilling an entire region for weeks, possibly months, and patiently waiting for invisible patterns to become visible. Where do vehicles repeatedly travel? Which structures show activity at unusual hours? Where do armed men congregate? Where do supplies arrive, and from which direction? You observe everything. You record everything. You wait. Because even a man hiding in a jungle still requires food, fuel, communications equipment, and people around him. Every one of those necessities creates a signature, and patient, persistent surveillance will eventually capture that signature. The second layer was the MQ-9 Reaper, the armed drone most people recognize by name. The Reaper is confirmed as the primary platform in Southcom's counter-narcotics strike operations. CIA-operated Reapers have been flying armed missions from locations including Puerto Rico, loaded with Hellfire missiles specifically configured for direct action engagements. Once the wide-area surveillance narrowed down a probable location for Guerrero, the Reaper moved in closer. It descended to a lower altitude, it focused its sensor aperture, it began close-pattern surveillance, watching a specific compound with extraordinary granularity, tracking who enters the building, who exits, what vehicles arrive, and when, how long specific individuals remain inside specific structures, when armed guards rotate their shifts. This surveillance phase can extend for days. No one pulls the trigger until the intelligence picture is airtight, and the target identification is confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt. The third and most critical layer was human intelligence on the ground. This is where the story takes its dramatic geopolitical turn. The new Venezuelan government, and I will explain how that government came to exist in just a moment, confirmed publicly that they provided intelligence and what they described as specialized technical support for this operation. In straightforward operational language, that means human sources positioned near or inside the compound, verified in real time that Nino Guerrero was physically present in the target building at the precise moment the strike was authorized. This three-part fusion, orbital surveillance from above, drone optics from mid-altitude, and human confirmation on the ground, is what converts a suspected location into a confirmed target. It is what provides a military commander the legal authority and the tactical confidence to issue three critical words: release the weapon. And the weapon they selected tells its own powerful story. The strike footage Southcom released shows a top-down camera feed, almost certainly from the MQ-9 Reaper's onboard sensor package, capturing a small structure with a distinctive green roof. Then, in less than a heartbeat, a single detonation erases the building from the face of the Earth. The explosion signature is consistent with a thermobaric Hellfire missile, specifically the AGM-114N variant, sometimes called the Metal Augmented Charge. A thermobaric weapon operates nothing like a conventional explosive. It does not shatter walls with flying shrapnel. Instead, it disperses a fine cloud of aerosolized fuel into the surrounding air, and then ignites it in a secondary detonation. The result is a massive overpressure wave, a wall of superheated, violently compressed air that crushes everything inside an enclosed space. The building does not burn in the traditional sense. It fails structurally from the inside out in a fraction of a second. Imagine pressurizing a sealed container far beyond its design tolerance. It does not crack slowly. It collapses catastrophically and completely. The weapon choice was precise and intentional. Maximum destruction concentrated on the target structure. Minimum debris scattered into the surrounding jungle. And critically, the Reaper retained additional missiles in reserve for follow-up strikes in case anyone attempted to flee the compound after the initial blast. You never expend your entire weapons load on a single pass. You always preserve the ability to re-engage. One weapon, one building, one man. And the deliberate decision to release that footage publicly was itself a strategic act. A message transmitted directly to every criminal leader watching anywhere in the world. If you are still watching at this point, you are clearly not a casual viewer. You want depth. You want context. You want the kind of analysis that most channels cannot or will not deliver. So if you have not already, tap that like button right now. It takes 1 second, but it tells the algorithm this video deserves to reach more people who think critically. And drop a comment below with your country flag so I can see just how far this conversation is reaching across the globe. Now let me answer the question that should be forming loudly in your mind. How does a United States military drone strike occur inside Venezuelan territory, with the Venezuelan government not only permitting it but actively assisting, when barely a year earlier that same country was governed by Nicolas Maduro, a man who treated Washington as his sworn enemy? Earlier in 2026, Maduro was removed from power in a covert operation. The complete details of how that unfolded remain partially classified, but the outcome was undeniable. A new government assumed control in Caracas, and that government had overwhelming, urgent reasons to cooperate with the United States immediately. First, legitimacy. Any government that assumes power under extraordinary circumstances desperately needs international recognition, and American recognition above all else. Without it, you govern as an isolated, unrecognized regime. With it, you have a foundation. Second, economic survival. Venezuela's economy had been devastated for years under layers of American sanctions. The new leadership needed those sanctions lifted urgently to prevent inheriting a country in complete economic collapse. Third, and this mattered most on the ground, they needed help reclaiming their own nation from the inside. Tren de Aragua had been functioning as a state within a state. Guerrero's organization controlled territory within Venezuela's borders. It collected taxes from citizens. It administered its own brutal form of justice. It commanded armed forces that rivaled local police. The new government simply could not consolidate authority while a criminal empire operated a parallel government inside their own country. The arrangement was direct and mutually beneficial. Venezuela shares intelligence and provides ground-level operational support. The United States brings surveillance technology, precision strike capability, and the diplomatic recognition the new government urgently requires. Both sides gain. Both sides delivered. Southcom Commander General Francis Donovan confirmed the operation was conducted as a joint effort. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth publicly declared that the strike demonstrates the shared commitment of the United States and Venezuela to deny narco-terrorists any safe haven anywhere in this hemisphere. Pay close attention to that phrasing. It is not the language of a single isolated event. It is the language of a sustained doctrine, a declaration that this chapter is far from closed. But here is where honesty becomes essential. We must be clear-eyed about what this strike accomplished and what it did not. Eliminating Nino Guerrero matters enormously. He was not merely a boss sitting in a chair issuing directives. He was the architect of the entire machine. He designed the organizational blueprint of Tren de Aragua from the ground up. He built the trafficking pipelines. He cultivated corrupt relationships across more than a dozen nations. He engineered the command structures that allowed 7,000 members on 4 continents to coordinate as a single organism. His removal is a significant blow, but it does not destroy the organization. And history has demonstrated this lesson at a staggering human cost. When Pablo Escobar was killed in December 1993, millions around the world believed Colombian cocaine trafficking had ended. It had not. His death was celebrated on magazine covers. Politicians lined up to claim credit. But behind the celebration, cocaine kept flowing. Within 18 months, the Cali cartel had absorbed Escobar's networks and expanded them aggressively. Production actually increased after his death. When the Cali leadership was eventually arrested, the network splintered into dozens of smaller cartels, but the drugs never stopped. New men filled old roles. The infrastructure survived its creator because nobody had bothered to dismantle it. The only thing that changed was the name at the top of the org chart. The lesson is painfully clear. Removing a leader while leaving the infrastructure intact is like cutting the top off a weed while leaving its roots deep in the soil. It grows back. Sometimes stronger, sometimes more dangerous. Tren de Aragua was specifically engineered to survive this exact kind of decapitation. Guerrero designed it that way deliberately, because he built the organization inside a prison system where centralized command was perpetually vulnerable to disruption. He created distributed operational cells built for independence. Each cell was designed to be self-sustaining. Regional commanders had the authority and resources to operate autonomously for months without any guidance from headquarters. The enforcement cells in Aurora, Colorado do not require instructions from a Venezuelan jungle to continue extorting businesses. The trafficking pipelines running through Colombia and Peru do not shut down because one man is dead. The money laundering operations spinning through shell companies in Madrid and Miami keep turning without interruption. So the essential question is not whether this strike was impressive. It unquestionably was. The essential question is what follows it. A genuine campaign to dismantle Tren de Aragua demands simultaneous action on 3 distinct levels. The top, leadership elimination, which Southcom addressed with a Hellfire missile through a green roof. The middle, financial infrastructure destruction, money laundering networks, shell companies, cryptocurrency exchanges, real estate investments, cash-intensive front businesses. This is the painstaking, unglamorous, headline-free work of the DEA, operating alongside financial intelligence units across multiple countries, and the bottom, street-level enforcement cells in American and European cities. IC, the FBI, Europol, and local law enforcement systematically dismantling operational nodes one by one. If all 3 levels are being engaged simultaneously, then Bolivar's state was an opening salvo in a coordinated campaign capable of genuinely crippling this organization from its head to its roots. But if the Guerrero strike was a standalone event, a dramatic headline without a dismantlement machine grinding behind the scenes, the outcome becomes sadly predictable. Someone steps into the vacuum, the cells reorganize, trafficking continues, and within a year, Tren de Aragua operates again under new management. Another variable complicates this picture, and it emerged on the exact same morning thousands of miles away: the Iran nuclear situation. Pakistan's prime minister announced that the United States and Iran had agreed on a final nuclear deal text. But then Iran's semi-official news agency published its own version of that text, claiming Tehran undertakes no new commitments whatsoever. Two completely contradictory descriptions of the same supposed agreement. Why does nuclear diplomacy in the Middle East affect a counter-narcotics campaign in South America? Because sustained military and intelligence operations demand sustained attention from the highest decision-makers. If the Iran situation fractures, the administration gets pulled into a crisis consuming the identical senior officials, intelligence assets, and strategic bandwidth required for a multi-tier campaign against Tren de Aragua. Strategic attention is finite. The world routinely presents multiple emergencies at the worst possible moment, and cartel leaders understand this dynamic better than most analysts. They watch the news, they calculate. If the Middle East erupts, South America slides down the priority list, and in that gap, criminal networks quietly rebuild. There is reason for cautious optimism, however, and it lives in the operational architecture itself. The system Southcom employed is remarkably resource efficient. Global Hawks fly autonomously for over 30 hours per mission. Reapers operate from Puerto Rico with small support teams. The Venezuelan government supplies ground intelligence. The actual strike consumed a single missile. Compare that to a conventional approach. A traditional special operations raid would demand weeks of staging, hundreds of personnel, helicopter fleets, extraction contingencies, and complex diplomatic negotiations. The drone architecture eliminated that entire burden. This is a lightweight, persistent, repeatable capability that can sustain pressure for months or years without draining resources from other global theaters. There is also an emerging technology worth noting. The defense firm Anduril has developed the Barracuda family, autonomous cruise missiles integrated with an AI command platform called Lattice. These systems are modular, comparatively affordable, and launchable from air, ground, or maritime platforms. Whether Barracuda variants participated in this specific operation remains unconfirmed. But the broader concept, AI-guided autonomous weapons persistently hunting dispersed narco-trafficking targets across jungle and ocean, fits this mission as if custom designed. That is where counter-narcotics warfare is heading, and the Guerrero strike may mark the first visible step down that road. We have gone deep into this analysis now. And if you are still here, you belong to a rare percentage of viewers who genuinely want to understand the forces shaping the world around them. That matters to me. If this video has earned your subscription, now is the time. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications. When the next phase of this campaign becomes visible, this channel will break it down first. And at this level of depth, no clickbait, no shallow takes, only substance. Now, let me address the most fragile element in this entire equation, the Venezuelan partnership itself. Right now, the new government cooperates fully. The incentives are obvious, but partnerships built on transactions can erode the moment the underlying calculus shifts. If Caracas consolidates power and no longer depends on Washington for legitimacy, enthusiasm for hosting American drone strikes on Venezuelan soil may cool significantly. If domestic political backlash emerges, citizens uncomfortable with foreign military operations over their homeland, even against universally despised criminals, the new government may face pressure to step back from the relationship. This is not a prediction, it is a planning variable. Any serious long-term campaign must build redundancy into its intelligence architecture. You develop multiple sources, create alternative operational pathways. You never stake your entire strategy on a single partner's ongoing cooperation, because in international relations, goodwill has an expiration date. So where does everything stand? The strike on Nino Guerrero was a genuine, unambiguous operational achievement. The most wanted criminal in the hemisphere was located inside the most inaccessible terrain on the continent and eliminated with surgical precision. A man who evaded a $5 million bounty for years. A man who rebuilt command structures after losing his prison fortress. Found, fixed, finished. The operation also proved something larger. A real, functioning U.S.-Venezuela security partnership now exists, producing kinetic results, not just press releases. That signal echoes across every criminal leadership structure in Latin America. The message is unmistakable. No jungle is dense enough. No border is sacred enough. No hideout is remote enough. But the unanswered question looms larger than the explosion itself. Was this the opening move of a sustained, multi-level dismantlement campaign, or a single dramatic moment that will fade from priority as the next global crisis consumes Washington's attention? The indicators are straightforward. Watch for coordinated DEA actions against Tren de Aragua financial networks in the coming weeks. Asset seizures, money launderer arrests, sanctions on front companies. If those materialize, you are watching a genuine dismantlement effort. Watch for mid-level operative arrests in American and European cities, FBI and ICE actions clearly linked to intelligence flowing from this partnership. If those come, the campaign is real and working from the top all the way to the streets. But if the weeks pass and nothing follows, if the news cycle moves on and silence replaces momentum, then what happened in Bolivar State was a powerful statement, not a strategy. And the distance between a statement and a strategy is the distance between a headline and a genuine victory. Every cartel boss from Sinaloa to São Paulo is calculating this exact equation right now. Those who believe a sustained campaign is underway will scatter, restructure their networks, accelerate succession planning, and relocate financial operations to less cooperative jurisdictions. Those who believe it was a one-time display will hold their ground and wait for American attention to drift elsewhere. Both groups are placing the same bet, a bet on American resolve. The next 90 days will settle who was right. One thermobaric Hellfire answered a question on June 12, 2026. It proved the most wanted man in the hemisphere could be found and destroyed no matter where he concealed himself. That answer is permanent. Nino Guerrero is never coming back. But the deeper question, whether the United States possesses the focus, the discipline, and the sustained political will to systematically destroy the machine this man built, remains wide open. The missile was the dramatic part. What follows is what truly determines the outcome, and that is what separates a moment from a turning point, a headline from a legacy, and a single strike from a lasting victory. If you made it to the very end of this video, you are not a passive consumer of content. You are someone who demands real substance. This channel exists for viewers exactly like you. Subscribe if you have not already. Turn on notifications so you are the first to know when Part 2 drops. And leave a comment right now with your honest answer. Do you believe this is the beginning of a real sustained campaign, or was it a one-time strike? Your perspective genuinely matters in this conversation. I will see you in the next one.